I wonder if the veterans that are joining us this evening would lead us in the pledge, please. Ladies and gentlemen.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. We have a number of proclamations this evening, and we're going to shift the order just a little bit. Going to begin with the Dublin Jerome High School girls golf team. I know you're here. If you'd come forward. Well, I have a proclamation to read in your honor, and it reads as follows. Whereas the Dublin Jerome High School girls golf team captured the Division I Girls State Championship on Saturday, October 19th, 2013 at the OSU Gray Course with a two-day combined score of 622, defeating contender Maslin Jackson. And whereas, once again, Dublin Jerome High School has the distinction of winning state titles for both the boys and girls golf teams in the same season, and whereas the hard work and individual efforts of each of the team members resulted in their success throughout the season and at the state championship level. And whereas the young and talented members of the Celtics girls golf team, bear with me now, ladies, and correct me if I misstate or misspeak your name. Lexi Toth, give us a, is that Lexi? Sybil Robinson. Mai Arana. Mariana Arana, and Reagan Diorio. There we go. All right. Whereas the state title followed a season in which the Celtics won their sixth consecutive league title and consecutive sectional title, and whereas the individual team members earned recognition as well, including Lexi Toth, Academic All-Ohio, just in case they forgot, First Team All-Ohio, First Team All-Central Ohio, Player of the Year, OCC, and Sybil Robinson, All-Ohio, Second Team All-Central Ohio, First Team All-OCC, Mai Arana, First Team All-Central Ohio, First Team All-OCC, and Mariana Arana, Second Team All-Central Ohio, First Team All-OCC, and Reagan Diorio, honorable mention All-Central Ohio, and second team All-OCC. And whereas the team is ably coached by head coach C.D. Butcher, who deserves recognition for the commitment to building an outstanding team, which again has achieved recognition at the state level. Now therefore, I, Timothy A. Lechleiter, Mayor of the City of Dublin, Ohio, on behalf of Dublin City Council, do hereby proclaim Friday, November 8th, 2013, as Dublin Jerome High School Girls Golf Team Day in the City of Dublin, and extend our congratulations to the team and their coach on this outstanding achievement. Give them a hand. Coach, would you like to say a word?
That pretty much covers it all. I would like to throw in that the combined GPA for these 5 girls is 4.1, which is pretty amazing with the time they spent.
Photo?
And now if we could ask the boys to come forward, please. The coach looks so young, I wasn't sure which one was the coach here. And your proclamation reads as follows. Whereas the Dublin Jerome High School boys golf team captured the third consecutive Division I Boys State Championship on October 18th and 19th, 2013 at the OSU Scarlet Course with a two-day combined score of 641, edging contender Pickerington North by 5 strokes, and third place Cincinnati St. Xavier by 6 strokes in the two-day 36-hole tournament. And whereas Dublin Jerome is the first boys program in Ohio to win the large school division of the state tournament 3 years in a row since Columbus Aquinas? Okay. Accomplished the feat from 1953 through 1955. The state championship is the Celtics' 6th in their program's 10-year history. And whereas, once again, Dublin Jerome High School has the distinction of winning state titles for both the boys and girls golf teams in the same season. And whereas the hard work and individual efforts of each of the team members resulted in their success throughout the season and at the state championship level. Whereas the young and talented members of the Celtics boys golf team include Brady Boyle. Brady, did I get the last name right? Say it for me.
Bull.
Brady Bowl. J.D. Fletcher. J.D. That's J.D. Jack Hersig, Grant Lewis, and Adam Stevens. And whereas the team had a remarkable season, finishing 27-1 in the Ohio Capital Conference, winning the Cardinal Division, the team was named section champion, winning the sectional tournament by 1 stroke, achieved the district championship by winning the district tournament by 6 strokes, and won the state tournament by 5 strokes. And whereas the team is ably coached by the ever-young head coach, Craig Zeziger, who deserves recognition for his commitment to building an outstanding team, which again has achieved recognition at the state level. Now, therefore, I, Timothy A. Lecklider, Mayor of the City of Dublin, Ohio, on behalf of Dublin City Council, do hereby proclaim Saturday, November 9th, 2013, as Dublin Jerome High School Boys Golf Team Day in the City of Dublin, and extend our congratulations to the team and their coaches on this outstanding achievement.
I just want to say thank you to the mayor and the Dublin City Council members for taking time out of your busy schedule to recognize these unbelievable student athletes. Great bunch of guys. We had a blast all season, and can't believe that we won 3 titles in a row. So go Celts. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Congratulations. Good job.
I'm going to ask all of the veterans to join me up here, if you would. Very good. Sure. Thank you all. The proclamation reads as follows. Whereas Veterans Day provides an opportunity to publicly commemorate the contributions of living veterans, through a congressional resolution, Armistice Day officially received its name in the United States in 1926 and was declared a national holiday 12 years later by congressional action. And whereas, recognizing that peace was equally preserved by the veterans of World War II and the Korean War, Congress made the day an occasion to honor all those who have served our country. And in 1954, President Dwight D. Eisenhower signed a bill proclaiming November 11th as Veterans Day. And whereas, there are more than 23 million veterans throughout the United States, including generations of citizens who have risked their lives while serving in World Wars I and II, Korea, Vietnam, the Persian Gulf, and the global war on terror. Our veterans have fought for the security of our country and the peace of our world, defending our founding ideals, protecting the innocent, and liberating the oppressed from tyranny and terror while enduring the hardships, fears, and tragic losses of war. And whereas Americans live in freedom because of the courage, dedication to duty, and love of country by our veterans. On Veterans Day, we honor these brave men and women who have served in our armed forces and defended our nation. And whereas the Wesley G. Davids American Legion Post 800 invites veterans and their families to a breakfast hosted by Le Chatelaine in historic Dublin and a ceremony to follow at the Dublin Grounds of Remembrance in Dublin Veterans Park on Monday, November 11th. Now therefore, I, Timothy A. Lechleiter, Mayor of the City of Dublin, on behalf of City Council, do hereby proclaim the week of November 4th through November 11th as Veterans Week in the City of Dublin, urging all citizens to recognize the sacrifices made by veterans in preserving our freedoms, and encouraging all citizens to display the United States flag and to participate in patriotic activities throughout the week.
Thank you, on behalf of all the veterans, I'm sure.
We want the female. Stand side to side. Stand.
And if David Hines would join me now. I have a proclamation, which I believe will be self-explanatory as I read it. This is Mr. David Hines here. The proclamation reads as follows. Whereas the Ohio Veterans Hall of Fame will induct 15 new members, including Dublin resident David Hines, in a ceremony to be held on Thursday, November 7th, 2013, at Veterans Memorial Auditorium in Columbus, Ohio. And whereas the Ohio Veterans Hall of Fame was established in 1992 to recognize Ohio veterans who contribute to their local communities after completion of honorable military service. Those selected for the honor of induction are veterans who have continued to serve and inspire their fellow citizens with their deeds and accomplishments throughout their lifetime. The members of the Hall of Fame are honored in a permanent display at the Reich Center in Columbus. And whereas charter members of the Hall of Fame include 6 Ohio military veterans who were elected President of the United States and all Medal of Honor recipients from Ohio. And whereas Dublin resident David Hines will be inducted into the Ohio Veterans Hall of Fame on Thursday, November 7th, 2013. Mr. Hines was awarded 3 Purple Hearts and other citations in a distinguished military career in the United States Marine Corps. And whereas David served as commissioner for the Muskingum County Veterans Service Commission, as a trustee for the Zanesville Vietnam Veterans Outreach Program, and on numerous volunteer initiatives for the benefit of or to honor veterans. And whereas David also served as a firefighter in his hometown of Zanesville and was involved with numerous fundraisers, including those for the Salvation Army, Big Brothers Big Sisters, and other community organizations. He served on the board of directors for the Humane Society and was a member of the Eagles Club, JC's, Meals on Wheels, and the Organization of Chinese Americans. And whereas David has contributed in countless ways to the Dublin community. Most notably, he served on the Dublin Veterans Committee, which established the grounds of Remembrance Memorial in Dublin Veterans Park. Now retired, he currently volunteers with Dublin Food Pantry. Now, therefore, I, Timothy A. Lechleiter, Mayor of the City of Dublin, on behalf of City Council, do hereby proclaim Thursday, November 7th, 2013, as David Hines Ohio Veterans Hall of Fame Day in the City of Dublin, thanking him for his outstanding service and lifelong dedication to his country, and congratulating him on this well-deserved recognition.
Thank you very much. With everything I've done, you probably think I'm about 80 years old, but I'm not quite that old. But I want to take time to thank Michael Keenan, the support of the Dublin City Council, and also the Public Relations Department for the support and my nomination to the Ohio Veterans Hall of Fame. And this is for all the veterans that served. Thank you.
Tim, could I add one thing very quickly? Mr. Hines, I'm on the Hall of Fame Board of Directors, and I just want to be the first one to say congratulations, well done, and we'll see you on Thursday. Thanks so much. Okay, thank you.
Okay, I think that finishes our proclamations for this evening. Okay. We're going to move on to, he's not here. Citizen comments, to allow citizens to comment on any item not on this evening's agenda. We have a handful of individuals who have signed up to speak this evening. We'll begin with Mr. Maurer.
Your Honor, members of the council, I need to tell you that I picked up this evening that somebody here in Dublin has been lying about my age. And I need to tell you that that can arouse fierce passion in me because I hate age. And but that's enough of that. Your Honor, I need to apologize to you this evening, and maybe to the whole council, and maybe to the council and to management as well, because at the last council meeting, I spent the whole 5 minutes telling you what you knew. Namely, you had watched the Frontline several hours expose of the scandal of concussion in football. As you know, I still owe you something up here. As you know, I have written an argument delivered to the university in which I advocate the abolition of football from universities because it has, as I said before, nothing to do with the fundamental studies of the universe and of the human being in the universe which take place in the university. I will deliver that thing sometime up here. I apologize, as I say, because I spent time on the thing you knew, namely the frontline expose of concussions in football. I'm coming back to it just briefly, the last time probably, because I want to express my opposition to the deal you made with the university coaches of football, and you're inviting them again to the city here for next year. I think you probably have a moral problem on your hands now, because that advocating of football is advocating now shortening of kids' lives. I suppose you probably will not rescind the invitation to the football coaches to come here and do it. I'm going to make one concession. I'm not going to call it a rally. I'll call it instead a whoop-de-doo. So you probably will not rescind the arrangement you made with them, but I protest the amount of tax money that I paid for that. There we are. I think the solution to the potential shortening of kids' lives is to tell mothers, whether in this room or out in TV land, who have boys in football teams, that they're heading on a path towards a shortened life. And ever concerned about my community and the world at large, I leave on that note. Thank you again.
Thank you, Mr. Maurer.
May I ask a question from our staff? Are the city taxes funding this, or are the bed tax funding this?
It would be the bed tax out of the hotel motel tax.
So it's other people's money, basically, who's staying in the hotel?
It's from, yeah, people staying at the hotels.
And did we make the arrangements, or did the Convention Bureau make the arrangements?
The Visitors and Conventions Bureau has been working with the organization.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you for asking that, because I was curious about where the money came from, too. So it doesn't have any of my pennies in it, does it?
Only if you've stayed in the hotel the last few years in Dublin.
I'll have to remember not to stay there now for a while.
Well, you can have Columbus fund things with their high.
Thank you, Mr. Maurer.
Oh, okay, thank you. Mayor's getting impatient with me. See you later.
Thank you.
Hey, I only have one more meeting. This is my chance.
Brett Page. Brett Page. Excuse me?
He's here.
Oh. Are you all speaking on the same thing? Okay. Mr. Roth, yes, I guess.
Hi, I'm Randy Roth, and I live at 6987 Grandy Cliffs Drive. And I just want to say that I'm speaking for myself this evening. I am president of the East Dublin Civic Association, but we just started talking about things. We haven't come to any resolution. And the thing that I wanted to speak about with you tonight is about the bonds that are coming up for moving forward with the Bridge Street plan. A number of us in East Dublin have spoken informally and at our recent candidates night that we had about our concerns about the Bridge Street corridor plans. And I think it's important, and I get the feeling, and why I'm here tonight, is I'm worried that we haven't really built the broad consensus yet of support we need for this plan. We've been moving forward with consensus on everything else. And I just hear, what I've heard essentially is a lot of dissent in the community. And I'm not saying that dissent is well-informed or that's justified, et cetera, but it's there. And I think it's a really important thing that we think about these issues. And among all of us, many of us admire the willingness of the city council and the staff to think boldly about the future. And we appreciate the work you've done. The trouble that people are having is about with the density, the number of multifamily units we're talking about, most of which will be in East Dublin. But one of the things, it's aesthetics. It's the scale of the buildings. One of the things that we had always talked about, and I remember this in the community plan committee in the mid-90s. I remember this when we turned down a beautiful development by Frank Cass. We said, whatever goes on this site needs to take advantage of the contour of the hill. It needs to keep that contour. So we could stack the buildings up, but they need to kind of fold up so we'd see the sweep of that. And when we look at this, we see a wall right there with the highest buildings right up front. And so we're really wondering about, instead of taking advantage of the hill, they seem to overwhelm it. And that's a concern. We have a lot of traffic problems, concerns about traffic. And I'd have to say that for myself, having been on the traffic transportation task force with Rick Gerber when we did the plan in the mid-90s, and on the traffic subcommittee, I remember that we worked very hard on trying to figure out how big a city we could be and what kind of densities we could live with. And I understand we're trying to go to a new concept here where people aren't going to commute as far to work, that we're trying to think we're going to be more of a walking city. But boy, the numbers really didn't work at 60,000. That's why we capped things at R5. We made a conscious decision about that. And the other thing that I think about why that transportation program was so good is because it was citizen-driven. What we had is you appointed a group of citizens. It included engineers who were good generalists. We had 2 mathematical modelers, Morton O'Kelly and myself, who know a lot of the math and knows the problems with the mathematical modeling that they're using. We had a lot of very well-informed citizens. And we had great consultant and staff members to work with. And the fact is we all realized we came out with a better product working together than we could have separately. And I think Rick would back me up on this. Every time that those of us who were not staff or consultants got together and said, look at this, try this plan, do this scenario instead. Every time we turned out to be right, because it's our town. And we have a kind of expertise, and we work together. There's no question that who deserves the most credit for that was our staff and our consultant. But the fact is, we were in charge. And the problem is, I think, when you tweak the community plan instead of do it with everybody the way that we did with the subcommittees and everything, I think it kind of makes it harder to build consensus. It makes it harder to identify those problems. And what we did more than anything else in that process doing that way is build trust. And so this, I think, is one of the things. We've done it differently this time. I'm not criticizing that. It's just a part of the city. But I think that's raised a lot of problems. And I know still a lot of my neighbors are having sticker shock. Really, because they can't see how this can work without widening Riverside Drive to 4 lanes. And we know even our traffic plan told us with the first community plan we're going to have to do that. We don't control it. And how much would that cost? How much will it cost us? And we can't widen 161. It's never going to happen. And, we don't control our destiny with these roads out there, nor do we control the land uses. As we noticed, we've got a Target coming in right north to us on Sawmill Road. We've got a Walmart coming in. We have no control over those zonings, no control over those densities and those traffic flows. So I guess what we're really concerned about is that we really need to try to find a way to build consensus. I'd also like to say to you, and you've been there, I remember Marilee and Rick and Mike were so kind to come to our candidates night 2 years ago. You'll notice that when the citizens invite you to talk to their meeting, they're real critical. They speak up. Most of my neighbors here tonight said, Rand, you speak for us. And I'm not going to tell you everything I'm hearing or thinking right here in public, but not all of it is printable. And I think it's important, but the thing is in those forums, you're going to hear something a little different. You know that. And I'll give you one more example. There's wonderful.
Excuse me, Randy.
Yeah.
The red light's
Okay.
blinking, so we're going to wrap up.
Okay. Well, I'll wrap
If you
up,
can
I'll stop
summarize,
there.
please.
But that's fine. Well, thank you.
Okay?
Okay.
Thank you. Mr. Page? Good evening.
Good evening. Do you need me to state my name at all?
Yes, please.
Brett Page, 7638 Kelly Drive, Dublin,
Thank
east
you.
side of Dublin.
Thank you.
I don't come here as prepared as Mr. Roth with specific speech points regarding, but I do agree with most of what Mr. Roth indicated. And I do appreciate the amount of time serving for the city that goes into this planning process, and everybody on city council and all the planning and zoning and all the different commissions working collaboratively and gathering input from as many people as possible into such an important issue impacting the long-term development of our city. And I come speaking that because that's very important to me. That's the reason I came and decided to build in Dublin on the east side and have my family grow up here with my wife and 4 boys. One of the things that's very important to me is the city of Dublin that we will have for years to come. And I'm excited about many aspects of what is being put in front of us for the Bridge Street Corridor District. And I asked for thoughtful consideration that while we've done so much planning, there's always time for us to continue to do that collaborative discussion, because what we're going to be doing here is going to be impacting us dramatically for the next 30 to 40, 50 years. I think density has been a thing that has got me involved with the city. It is something very important on our side of the city. When I talk to many fellow neighbors, density is something that impacted our neighborhood when we were talking about something that was decided for us 20 years ago, and we had to fight through some things to work on a density issue in our particular, the neighborhood I live in. And I think what I learned from that process is that once something is set in stone, and if it made a lot of sense 20 years ago, but didn't make sense when all of a sudden something was going to be developed, that kind of thing is very important for us to be thinking about as we're moving forward here, is do we have the information necessary to really truly understand the true impact, not only on our revenues, but the psychological and aesthetic impact on our city? Can we truly bank on that? Because if we can't say that without a shadow of the doubt, that's something that's going to be very hard for us to go back on 15, 20 years from now. You're going to be fighting legal battles, costing the city tons of money about things if, for instance, we don't like the density. It's not working out particularly the way we planned and hoped it would. And next thing you know, we have a developer who wants to ramrod a certain amount of density because it was spoken for and it was put into our documents, and it's something we have to basically live by. It's something that I've experienced as a Dublin City resident. That's something that's got me involved with the city. So I just asked for that. And I also asked to think about the educational aspect for our kids, is that currently on the east side, with the amount of multifamily development we currently have, that there is a lot of impact on the number of families moving in and the density. And not to say that we don't have great families moving into our multifamily developments, but it does create increased density, increased pressure on our school districts on our side of town. And I'm wanting to kind of think, do we have the planning thoroughly put in place to think about how we're going to be meeting the needs of when we put in that much density into one side of the city, which is already where the condensation of density pretty much is. So lots of great things about the plan, very exciting things. Just a lot of continued things that need to be thoughtfully considered, and I just ask you to make sure that before we make finalization of plans, that City Council thoroughly feels that they've answered those questions to the best of their ability. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Page. Bob McKnight?
Bob McKnight, 7775 Riverside Drive, Vice President of the East Dublin Civic Association, and sometimes called upon to be the color commentator. Yeah, we live on the Scioto River, and you folks are right. It is the best premier natural resource in the city of Dublin. You were smart to try and exploit that in the Bridge Street plan, but the plan, when it came to light last February, was so different from everything we had ever heard or seen in the city of Dublin that our association was struck dumb, and we stayed that way all year. Riverside Drive was a gateway, we were told, and there was talk about 200-foot setbacks for residences. Now we're looking at what, 25 feet to a wall 40 to 70 feet high? Residential, commercial, hotel, convention buildings. And we lose green space on one side of the road. And on the other, we get an overdeveloped glut of buildings which appear somewhat like they were planned as part of Chairman Mao's 5-year plan. On a mere 25 acres, 140,000 square feet of office, a 196-room hotel, 30,000 square foot convention center, 90,000 square feet of retail, 2,875 car garage, and nearly 1,200 residential units, most of them one bedroom. Now I ask you, do you know a single person who's desirous of living in a one-bedroom apartment? No matter how nice the amenities, how about a desk, a computer center, a bed for a visitor? Are these units being planned for people who can't afford another 150 square feet? How long will it be before the Columbus Metro Housing Authority comes in to rescue the project? How long after that will the Columbus Shelter Board be putting indigents there? And why have a convention center there when all the other hotels are way up the street in Metro Place? Is that a plan? And we're told there will be a wonderful $13 million pedestrian bridge so that people can easily walk to historic Dublin. Well, if there's going to be 10 new restaurants in East Dublin, why walk? And how do people get to and from the bridge? One of the development consultants told a friend of mine last week that they'd probably have to put in a crosswalk. First, we risk life and limb on probably the largest and busiest roundabout in the state of Ohio, and then we stop traffic, probably causing a backup into the roundabout whenever someone wants to saunter across a busy state route. Is that really a plan? Speaking of the $4 million roundabout, plus the $5.35 million land acquisition cost, all to replace a perfectly functioning intersection, how long will it take to construct? Will we be able to use Riverside Drive during construction? What's our alternative route home? Sawmill? No traffic there. Friends, I don't think you have a plan here. You've paid consultants to create something between a pipe dream and a nightmare. I recognize that the river is a huge asset, but I don't think it should be depreciated in this manner. Stop spending money that way, and don't authorize the bonds to throw more after what's already been spent. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McKnight. Scott Herring? Pardon me? I said thank you. Good evening.
Good evening. My name's Scott Herring. I live at 3280 Lilymar Court, which is in the Martin Road corridor. And although my neighborhood has been exempted from the Bridge Street plan, the back of my property does abut some R12 development, which currently is the most dense. That's some housing units that are behind the Oakland Nursery. To build on what Randy and Bob have shared, yes, I attended the great gala 2 weeks ago over at the OCLC, and what a fantastic show. And I was just so surprised that I was rendered speechless. I didn't realize that this project had gone to this extent. I don't follow the stories in the paper that much. 2 years ago, I had attended a public event that was held in the lobby of the Wendy's. That was a very early preliminary thing, and I said, geez, Over the years, 15 years that I've been in Dublin, I've gone to some P&Z meetings, and every time that there's been a development, there's been great discussion about the open space and the open space. And all I've heard in the Bridge Street corridor, especially east of the river, is the density, the density, the density. And so, yes, as others have stated tonight, that's been a mismatch for me. I haven't paid so much attention, but I have seen in the papers recently that, yes, this land acquisition, suddenly $2 million for the fast food restaurant and millions more for the shopping center and then the driving range. And holy smokes, this is getting into some real money real quick. So I didn't realize it was going this far and this fast. At this meeting 2 weeks ago, all this bit about 4- and 6-story buildings and the densities and the whole walkability, but it did make me laugh because although there's some commercial within this Bridge Street area and east of the river, if there's 1,000 or 3,000 new units, I can't believe that they're all going to walk to work. And so like all the others and my neighbors that have shared their concerns with me, so much of this boils back down to the traffic. Traffic's already snug as we are. If this gets developed out, I'm just not hearing great confidence that Riverside Drive, as mentioned, a state highway, a decided necessary corridor to the north. The presentation 2 weeks ago was about how everyone would just step out of their apartment and across the street and be at this new park. And even that doesn't add up for me. We have the Kiwanis Park that's an access point to the river south of 161. Frequently, I see people accessing the river underneath the I-270 bridge. We have the Leather Lips Park, which is along the water. Of course, there's a great new park at Hart. So I have a hard time believing that our quadrant of the city is really in need of more parkland and that millions or scores of millions is going to be spent here to relocate a state highway and all these utilities. I guess as an overarching request, I just ask, can we make sure that we're doing this right? And that's what I've seemed to hear from my fellow citizens tonight. Yes, 2 years ago on a very blank sheet of paper, I thought, wow, this is daring to be so bold, but now I'm a little scared as the reality looms. That's what I ask that you all consider and do us right, please.
Thank you. That's it. There was no one else signed up. Okay. Marcia, did you have something you wanted to say?
Well, there's just, did Ann mention to you about,
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes,
Officer
thank you very
Keck.
much.
sorry,
Yes, I'll give the floor to you or to the chief.
go ahead.
Mayor, members of council, City Manager Grigsby, I just wanted to take a moment to invite you all and to recognize Officer Mike Keck. He will be retiring next week on the 14th after about 33 years of service and with the honor of being the longest serving, sorry, I don't mean, you want to sit down? All right. The longest serving member of the Division of Police in our history. Officer Keck started with the Division of Police in 1980. In fact, he was sworn in this very room, as was I, not in 1980, mind you. He has served with us. This was back when the city of Dublin was actually the village of Dublin. We had less than 4,000 people in the village of Dublin. I think our police department was 12? Number 7. I was number 14 when I started a few years later. But things were different back then. But there was a common vision back then, and we all knew that there were great things on the horizon for the city of Dublin. Mike, in his career, was one of our first traffic enforcement officers. He was one of our first motorcycle officers. He was our lead range instructor for many years. In fact, when we moved into our current facility with our great range downstairs, he's the one who was responsible for really getting that set up and functioning. So he's been an integral part of the police department for many, many years. Mike and his wife Claudia raised their son Matt and their daughter Melissa and have lived in the city almost that entire time. And I don't know, if you know Mike, if there's one word to describe Mike, it would not be emotional, it would be probably stoic. If there was two words to describe Mike, I think probably old school would be, and I mean that as a compliment. And I think Mike's stoic and old school attitude has been a calming force for many years for a lot of our younger officers. And I know that we're going to miss that. And I'm going to miss that, especially because he's the only guy left who's older than me. So I would like to invite you all to the ceremony next on the 14th on Thursday. At the Justice Center in the courtroom, we'll be celebrating Mike's career and honoring him before he leaves. And I'd just like to honor him tonight with a round of applause.
That's great.
Thanks, Chief. I'm a man of few words, so I'll make this real quick. I'm honored and humbled that you would take the time out of what's obviously a busy night to do this, and I'm very appreciative. Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to miss you.
Thank you so much for your service.
Thanks, Mike. Yes, it wasn't bad. We said it would be okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Chief, you said 4,000 people back in 1980? Less than that, so I'm sure glad we didn't stop the vision at 4,000 and let this city grow to include all these wonderful people here today and students and so forth. Thank you for your service.
Moving on to our consent agenda, we have 3 items listed on this evening's consent agenda. I would ask my colleagues whether they wish to remove one or more or any items from the consent agenda this evening. Hearing no response, I would move then that we approve the actions requested within the 3 items listed on this evening's consent agenda. Is there a second?
Second.
And if you call for the vote, please.
Vice Mayor Salee? Yes. Mayor Lecklider?
Yes.
Mr. Reiner?
Yes.
Mr. Keenan? Mrs. Boring?
Yes.
Mr. Gerber?
Yes.
Mr. Nissy Zerker?
Yes.
Great, thank you. Moving on then to the second reading of ordinances, beginning with ordinance 81-13.
Authorizing the city manager to enter into a contract for health services with the District Advisory Council of the Franklin County General Health District for 2014.
Thank you. Ms. Grigsby?
Yeah, this is our annual contract with the Franklin County Board of Health, and they're the agency for the city, so they cover Franklin, Union, and Delaware counties, anyone living in the city of Dublin. And the increase, the fees we've discussed in the memo, there's a 3% increase for next year. And the mosquito control management program is, there'll be a new contract for the next 3 years, and the Board of Health is scheduled to approve that sometime later this month. And if there are any questions, we'd be happy to address them.
Any questions? Hearing none, Ann, if you call for the vote, please.
Mr. Reiner?
Yes.
Mr. Keenan? Mrs. Boring? Mr. Nissy Zerker?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Salee?
Yes.
Mr. Gerber?
Yes.
Mayor Lecklider?
Yes. Thank you. Ordinance 82-13.
Authorizing modifications to the city's investment policy.
Thank you. Good evening.
Good evening, Mayor, members of council. As we discussed in our October 14th Finance Committee meeting, I have been working with Dennis Jacobozzi, President of United American Capital Corporation, to make modifications to the city's investment policy. Dennis, as you all know, is the city's investment advisor. We spoke at that meeting about all of the changes that were being proposed. In summary, just wanted to provide a couple of points. Many of the changes are just to clarify for market conditions that exist today. And secondly, there are a number of changes that make the policy consistent with Ohio Revised Code. Other notable changes include when the city is investing in commercial paper, we are actually making the restriction more stringent in that we would be required for those companies to have the highest level rating by 2 nationally recognized rating agencies. We have changed or recommended changes to the distribution that the city can have invested in commercial paper and bankers' acceptances from 25% as opposed to the 10% limit as it currently exists today. It limits the amount the city can invest with a single issuer to no more than 5% of the overall portfolio, as opposed to $1 million, as indicated in the policy today. It allows for the investment in any other state of Ohio programs, such as the relatively newly created Star Plus, and any other programs that the Treasurer of State might offer in the future. And then also it allows the city to purchase bonds or other obligations of the state or other political entities of the state of Ohio, as long as they're at least AA rated. And then finally, it clarifies that any broker-dealers cannot act as investment advisors if they are participating in the purchase or sale of securities. So it alleviates any conflict of interest that might exist. As requested by the Finance Committee, we will be certain to incorporate with any of our quarterly updates from here on out any notable changes in investment holdings or strategies, and then periodically touch base with council as to whether any modifications need to be made. Dennis Jacobosi is here this evening if there are any questions that were carried over from the prior meeting.
Any questions or comments?
No.
Thank you.
Thank you. And if you call for the vote, please.
Vice Mayor Salee.
Yes.
Mayor Lecklider.
Yes.
Mr. Gerber.
Yes.
Mrs. Boring. Mr. Keenan. Mr. Reiner.
Yes.
Mr. Nizzi Zerker.
Yes.
Thank you. Ordinance 83-13.
Authorizing the city manager to execute necessary conveyance documentation to acquire 0.138 acres, more or less, present road occupied, fee simple interest from Robin R. Campbell.
Thank you. Any changes?
No, no changes.
Council members have any comments? Hearing none, Ann, if you'd call for the vote, please.
Mr. Keenan. Yes. Mayor Lecklider.
Yes.
Mr. Nizzi Zerker. Mr. Reiner.
Yes.
Mr. Gerber.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Salee.
Yes.
Mrs. Boring.
Great, thank you. Ordinance 84-13.
Amending Section 153.066 of the City of Dublin Codified Ordinances to modify the Bridge Street District approval process.
Thank you. Good evening.
Good evening. Council heard a first reading of the proposed amendments to the Bridge Street District review and approvals process at the October 28th meeting. I'd be happy to give another overview of the proposed changes if council would like. Also, during that discussion last week, council requested some additional information about the role of the Architectural Review District in the approvals process, and that sparked additional discussion about the current appeals process as written in the code. The Law Director's Office has provided a memo outlining the appeals process, and Ms. Radler is prepared to provide an overview of that process if you would like.
What is council's pleasure?
I'd be
Excuse me?
interested in hearing that.
Okay.
Great. At the last council meeting, there was some discussion about what the recourse is when an applicant is, we've got an aggrieved applicant in the Bridge Street District. And we had significant discussion when this process was adopted to have some sort of safety valve in place in this district so that we have limited timelines for review and then the option to come to city council prior to going to court, which would typically be common pleas court. So I've just highlighted the current process. It's up on the board. Whenever a reviewing body, and that could be Planning and Zoning Commission, the ARB, or the Administrative Review Team, makes a decision where there's a disapproval in most cases, that party can appeal. And first, the appeal goes to the Board of Zoning Appeals, and we discussed that at the time of adoption, and the BZA does hear administrative appeals already. So they hear cases where there is an argument that a body or an official has made where they disagree with the decision. So the BZA is familiar with these types of cases, with being a reviewing body. We wanted to have another layer in place so that not every case would automatically come to council. So we put that in, but we've got time limitations. So as you'll note, we've got a 20-day limit for that. Once the BZA makes a decision, an appeal may be filed then to city council, and that's within 10 days. That decision of council to hear the appeal is completely discretionary. And so while a party can appeal BZA's decision to you, you don't have to take that appeal. It's completely within your discretion.
If you decide to hear that appeal, then you would have a full hearing at a subsequent meeting date where you would hear evidence, and then you have the authority to affirm, reverse, or otherwise modify the decision. Then from that point is where we would go to court. So the City Council does have final review of any decision of a reviewing body in Bridge Street District. And so this is the current way. Since we've had adopted Bridge Street, to my knowledge, there have been no appeals that have been filed in this process. We thought it best to have a consistent appeal from all reviewing bodies, but can certainly modify that as is your pleasure.
Would that be, the hearing be during a regular council meeting, or would we schedule a separate hearing for that matter
It could be
only?
either. You could hold a special meeting, or it could be, I think we contemplated it being at another regular council meeting.
Okay.
Other questions, comments? Does any council member wish for there to be any other presentation on the procedure?
No, I think that answers our questions from last. We weren't sure whether it would go to Muni Court directly or if it would come to us, and this is pretty clear that there's an option for somebody that receives a disapproval to come forward, so.
It sounds also that we are not bound by prior votes of any board or commission.
Absolutely. You've got complete latitude. The review criteria gives you complete authority to modify that decision. You're not constrained to a record or anything like that.
Are there still ex parte rules for?
Whenever you're sitting in an administrative capacity, the ex parte rules would apply.
So that would apply to council as well
Right.
if it did come from an appeal
Mhm.
process?
Right.
Okay.
That's a good question.
Yep.
Anyone else?
Yep.
When would that ex parte rule begin? When the appeal is filed?
I would argue it's when the appeal, the initial appeal from the BZA decision is filed with the clerk of council.
Okay. All right. Yes, it does.
Okay. Any other questions or comments?
No. I have one comment with respect to the ordinance. We heard a few folks speak earlier tonight, and I think that's part of why why I'm going to support 8413 is simply to give a public forum for people to have input, share their thoughts, so forth and so on. So I think this is a good step toward that end.
I would agree. I just would encourage the folks who spoke tonight to continue to stay engaged and, come back, because we, have been going through this process for a number of months and have basically been hearing from the public years, yeah. But I mean, it's a little frustrating to me that we get to this point and all of a sudden people have these huge problems with what we're doing. And we've got to hear. I always tell people I am a good council member, but I'm not clairvoyant. And I have to hear from the citizens, sooner rather than later is better. So
Okay.
stay dialed in.
Thank you. Ann, would you call for the vote, please? I'm sorry. Yes, this is a second reading. Thank you. Call for the vote, please.
Mr. Nancy Zerker?
Yes.
Mrs. Boring? Mr. Reiner?
Yes.
Mayor Lucklider?
Yes.
Mr. Gerber?
Yes.
Mr. Keenan? Vice Mayor Salee?
Yes.
Great, thank you. Moving on to the first reading of ordinances, beginning with ordinance 86-13.
Amending the annual appropriations for the fiscal year ending December 31, 2013.
Have an introduction, please.
I'll introduce it.
Thank you. Ms. Mula.
Good evening again.
Good evening.
This is a routine piece of legislation that we bring forward this time of year annually. And for the most part, it appropriates the dollars that we've received through our service payments into the TIF funds in which we pay for improvements that have either been authorized through our capital improvements program approval process or through other legislation that has come through for council approval. So all of those appropriations are outlined in the memo that was provided. Just wanted to point out two other items. This ordinance also appropriates funds related to our 2012 debt issuance. Part of it was to allow funding to be used to manage the bond proceeds, and those would be paid for from interest earnings. And then secondly, we needed to make an adjustment to account for our debt payment on the Dublin Road water tower and sewer lining that occurred or will occur in December of this year. And then finally, the last portion of this appropriation ordinance allows for additional payments to the Convention and Visitors Bureau, and that comes directly from our bed tax dollars. That particular revenue source has exceeded our planned revenue for the year, which results in more money being paid out to the Convention and Visitors Bureau. So with that, we are requesting a dispense with a public hearing and approval of Ordinance 8613 this evening.
Any questions or comments? Yes, ma'am.
I have a question regarding that Section 35. If there's been an increase in the bed tax collection, is not the Dublin Arts Council impacted as well?
No, they have a set amount in their contract, which is different than the amount that the Convention and Visitors Bureau receives. Their amount is a set dollar amount.
I thought it was 25%.
I did too. Wasn't it 25?
So it's 25% or A, B, and C?
Well, the way the legislation, when we entered into the lease agreement, it was an estimated 25%, and so it's a fixed dollar amount based upon the estimate at that time.
Not to exceed 25%.
Well, and it's a guarantee, where the Convention of Visitors Bureaus, it's based upon actual revenue received, where the Arts Council has a guaranteed amount, but it was based on projections that were made at that time.
Well, that's because the lease, if they didn't have revenue coming in, they didn't have enough revenue to pay the lease payment that we'd agreed to. But that lease escalated each year, did it not?
Yes, it did. And that was one of the things that they wanted in the lease, was to have certainty as
Yeah.
to the amount of money coming in.
We also provided for a reduction along the year, this last.
$2,000.
Right. So we've provided for some reduction periodically.
Any other questions?
I had a question regarding Section 29. It says the Bridge Street, is that right, $800,000 to be appropriated for professional services? What, has that already occurred, or is that something anticipated to occur?
Part of that has already been expended. It's our contract with MKSK for some of the design work that has gone on so far and continues to go on related to all of the improvements within Bridge Street.
Okay. Should contracts of that size come to council beforehand, or?
Well, and that was one that there was a memo that was prepared in May of this past year, identifying that we were going to have a primary consultant that oversaw and coordinated all the different disciplines that we're reviewing. And so that was provided to council previously. But typically, professional services agreements do not come before council. They're just the funding that is either approved through the project and the capital improvements plan or the budget.
Well, they don't have to come to council, but they could come to council. It's just not a requirement that professional services.
Yeah,
Is that
according
accurate?
to our code.
So if council wanted them to come to council, they could.
If council chose to change the code section, they could.
'Cause
But
I
this
know-
one, because we knew the size and the importance of this project, we provided information to council prior to entering into this agreement.
We've had issues in the past with some professional services, people that are professional service providers in Dublin that haven't ever really had an opportunity. And I'm speaking of some of the engineering issues, and it's really across the board. But I have heard that criticism in the past from some of our corporate clients.
I haven't heard anything recently,
Yeah.
but certainly 3 or 4 years ago, that had been an issue, primarily in the engineering area, were the ones I heard from anyway.
It just strikes me, when you get to a certain dollar figure, and I'm not questioning.
Mr. Gerber, I'm not sure your
Oh,
microphone.
Sorry, I'm not questioning it. I think when you get to a certain dollar figure, it just strikes me as that's something that we probably ought to be looking at. I'm not questioning the consultants that were selected or the type of work they've been doing, but, this is almost $1 million of money that's out the door, and it's by staff approval. I do recall a memo, but nonetheless, I think something like that should be vetted by this board.
When we got the memo, wouldn't that have been the appropriate time to?
I don't think that memo, as I recall, had a dollar figure in it, but maybe it did. I don't
Yeah, at
recall.
that time, we said it would be up to $1 million. And this includes the 4 main projects that we're working on, and the other impacts of the roadway to the private improvements. So it's a pretty significant professional services agreement, looking at the different issues that we're dealing with on Bridge Street.
Let's see, can we get a copy of that just
Sure.
for us to review? That would refresh my memory of what we looked at and what we did.
That's a good idea.
The
That would
next
be
meeting?
fine.
Yeah, thank you.
Can we, in some budgeting cycle, put a limit? I mean, professional services, you say that we don't need to prove it, but if we put a limit in the budget, wouldn't you have to, the staff come back to this council and ask for more?
Right, and that's why at the time, before we entered into this agreement, we provided the memo to council, because at that time, we didn't have the funds appropriated. Typically, it's discussed as part of the appropriation of the funds.
I thought we had put some type of limit at one time.
Okay. There's no other comment. As Ms. Muma requested, a motion to dispense with what would amount to a second public hearing in order to provide for immediate funding authorization for the projects and programs set forth therein. Would someone like to make that motion, please?
Also move.
Is there a second?
Second.
And if you call for the vote on the motion to dispense with the second public hearing.
Mrs. Boring? Mr. Gerber?
Yes.
Mr. Nancy Zerker?
Yes.
Mr. Keenan?
Yes.
Mr. Reiner?
Yes.
Mayor Lucklider?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Salee?
Yes.
Thank you. And on the ordinance?
Mr. Keenan?
Yes.
Mayor Lucklider?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Salee?
Yes.
Mrs. Boring? Mr. Gerber?
Yes.
Mr. Nancy Zerker?
Yes.
And Mr. Reiner?
Yes.
Thank you. Moving on to ordinance 87-13.
Providing for the issuance and sale of bonds in the maximum principal amount of $12 million for the purpose of paying the cost of improving the city's vehicular transportation system, including Emerald Parkway, by reconstructing, extending, opening, widening, grading, draining, curbing, paving, and resurfacing, site preparation, installing lighting, gas, electric, and communications facilities, sanitary sewer, storm sewer and water improvements, signage and signalization, sidewalks and bikeways, streetscaping, landscaping, aesthetic improvements, acquiring interest in real estate, therefore, together with all incidental work and related appurtenances thereto.
Is an introduction, please?
I'll introduce it.
Thank you. And I just want to be clear that with respect to this ordinance and the next two, that this is a first reading, the second reading will be on November 18th. Is that correct?
It's actually this ordinance, 8713, 8813, 8913, and 9013. So it's the next three in addition to the one she
In
just
addition to
read.
this one, so four total?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, thank you.
Would
Yes.
you like me to address these all together or individually? Okay. Okay, the first one is ordinance 87-13, and as the ordinance states, it provides funding for up to $12 million for construction of Emerald Parkway from Riverside Drive to Sawmill Road, or as we refer to it as Emerald 8. Design of this roadway was substantially completed in 2010, and over the past couple of years, we have been working on right-of-way acquisition, and that is essentially completed. The relocation of utilities along Bright Road is currently underway so that when this construction contract is awarded within the next few weeks, construction can begin immediately. This debt would be issued for 20 years and will be repaid from service payments received within the Kroger and McKittrick TIF funds.
I believe that we were going to have a Finance Committee meeting on Wednesday this week to review these four requests. So I'm not sure how far we want to go tonight. And then next Monday would be when we would, is it next Monday? Is that
2 Mondays.
2 Mondays from now, whatever the date is, that we would come with a Finance Committee recommendation as well.
I would like to see what what the total cost of the issuance is. I noted that earlier, and I think in an email or.
Yes.
The bond council, I mean, there's a lot of cost of issuance. If I could see those itemized.
Absolutely. We will provide that to you. We have been working on all four of these bond ordinances in total with each other, which includes a BAB refunding, which is ordinance 90-13. And so right now, we're roughly estimating the cost to be under 1% of the overall bond issuance, which the package as it's structured today is approximately $38 million.
But the BAB would be different because of the you're not going to have that interest rate reduction that's going away because of, doesn't sequestration take that down?
Yes, we've looked at the.
So that's different than a normal bond issue.
Right. It's a different type of, it's a different type of refunding as opposed just a normal refunding.
Well, I guess my point is the first one, that's Build America bonds, you can give us some information on that, and then the others are all similar. Would that be accurate or not?
Yes, and when we have started to look at those costs based on your request today, we have looked at it from if we did not reissue or refund the Build America bonds, the incremental cost of refunding those bonds is very small compared to the overall project. But we will certainly provide that in more detail to you, and if we can get it together by our Wednesday meeting. If not, we'll provide it to you prior to the second reading.
The time frame of the expenditure from the time the bond's issued went to the time the funds are dispersed. I need to know that for each one of those issues. So is it a 2-month, 3-month, 1 year, 1.5 year? And then is there arbitrage available on those? Are we going to, what's the interest we're going to earn?
Okay.
Because that money's going to be held before it's
Right.
spent. What does it cost us? So are we losing money or making money?
I think if you are believing that all of this information is not going to be available by Wednesday, then there isn't a point in us meeting. We need to have a different date, because that was the purpose of our Finance Committee meeting Wednesday, was to learn all of these specifics that Mike is outlining so that we could have, a comprehensive conversation.
Can that be available Wednesday, I guess, is the...
Well, certainly. I mean, I have a very good idea on.
We don't need it tonight. We just need to
all
know
of
you
the
can...
Right, nearly all of the expenditures as to when they're going to be paid out. Emerald Parkway for Phase 8, we will be entering into that contract. It is out to bid now. So as soon as that construction starts, draws will be made on those bond funds.
And that's a 6-month project or a 1 year to completion? See, those are the things.
A
We
year
don't need
from
to,
now.
we don't need to visit it
Okay.
right now, I don't think, but let's gather, you know what we're looking for.
Sure.
More detail.
Merrily, it strikes me that we talk about this Wednesday, maybe tonight, just introduce these. We move on to our Finance Committee meeting Wednesday. Hopefully, all answers can be made. It can be properly vetted at that time. If not, then we can decide what we need to do.
Well, I would like to comment on this one. I don't know to what depth or discussion you all are going to have and present to council, but this particular ordinance, this one, is extremely important to many people in the community and to the corporations that we get this phase done. We've been waiting forever, it feels like, to have this done. So as I said, I'm not sure what depth you're going to and talk about, but certainly this one needs to proceed and get that contract awarded soon.
Well, that's the one that makes the most sense if you read through this to me, but that's
Well, I
just my
just wanted to
view.
put in my 2 cents worth, so
Okay.
that we, as again, that's very extremely important to very, very many citizens that we
Kathy, I
get this
think,
done.
I, as a member of the Finance Committee, certainly recognize that. I think it's more of just, and no one's purposely trying to hold us up, thinking that would be the proper forum in which to vet these before it comes to council.
Angel, and I'd really be interested in the completion date of these projects, if you can find that out.
And we were still within the time frame that you were requesting was the 18th for the vote.
Yes.
Yeah, so we're
Right.
still,
Yep.
that's our plan. It's not to delay it. We just,
right.
like Rick said, we just felt that we should have had them come to Finance Committee first so that we could really have all the detailed information that typically we don't have
Exactly.
at a council meeting. Thank you.
If I could just add, it certainly would be our intent to bring something like this to a Finance Committee meeting. And yes, we just had a Finance Committee meeting on October 14th. I did not meet with our financing team, if you will, till later on that week. And it wasn't till we started working through this that we realized that there were tax advantages that could be gained by doing part of an issuance that would settle this year and part that would settle next year. So ideally, in the future, we would certainly, even if it necessitated calling a special meeting of the Finance Committee, we will certainly do that moving forward. Just unfortunate that at the October 14th meeting, we weren't quite at that point in time yet.
Makes sense.
Make sure you give us where we're at with our capacity, too.
Absolutely.
I know that this will run our number up, although I don't think we're anywhere near our ceiling, like many entities are. So that capacity level will be important. Was there any thought given to using any surplus for any one of these?
Yes, in fact.
Maybe heresy, but it's worth asking.
In fact, some of these projects, and in particular, the roadway improvements that were funded relative to the Bridge Street transportation network, we have already spent funds from the general fund and advanced funds from the capital improvement fund to fund those expenditures up front. So, for example, roughly $3.3 million was spent already in June for that right-of-way acquisition at Bridgepoint. So this bond issue is simply to reimburse ourselves. The other component of that is for the Wendy's acquisition that we have already have an agreement in place, and that will be closing likely by June. So those are two reimbursements.
I just want to make sure you're thinking about it.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Absolutely.
We'll hear more Wednesday.
Is this something we should make a motion to refer to the Finance Committee since it's on our first reading?
I don't think it's necessary.
Okay.
I think we're fine.
We've
Thank
published a meeting now.
you.
Ann?
Yes.
Okay.
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 Ordinance 88-13.
Providing for the issuance and sale of bonds, the maximum principal amount of $9 million for the issuance and sale of bonds, the maximum principal amount of $9 million for the purpose of paying the cost of improving the city's vehicular transportation system, including the interchange I-270, U.S. Route 33, State Route 161, and U.S. Route 33 between I-270 and Avery Muirfield Drive by reconstructing, extending, opening, widening, grading, draining, curbing, paving and resurfacing, and site preparation, installing lighting, gas, electric, and communications, facilities, sanitary sewer, storm sewer, water improvements, signage and signalization, sidewalks and bikeways, streetscaping, landscaping, aesthetic improvements, and acquiring interest in real estate therefore, together with all incidental work and related appurtenances.
Thank you. Introduction, please.
That's it.
Is there anything else we need?
I think we're talking Wednesday.
We're all the same.
Okay.
They're all the same.
I'm just asking.
Just saying.
Thank you.
I think that's wise.
Ordinance 89-13.
Providing for the issuance and sale of bonds, a maximum principal amount of $5.7 million for the purpose of paying the cost of improving the city's vehicular transportation and system, including within serving the Bridge Street district by constructing, reconstructing, extending, opening, widening, grading, draining, curbing, paving, and resurfacing, and site preparation, installing lighting, gas, electric, and communications facilities, sanitary sewer, storm sewer, water improvement, signage and signalization, sidewalks and bikeways, streetscaping, landscaping, aesthetic improvements, and acquiring interest in real estate therefore, together with all incidental work and related appurtenances thereto.
Introduction.
I'll introduce it.
Thank you. I assume that's sufficient. Let's move on to ordinance 90-13.
Providing for the issuance and sale of bonds in the principal amount of $12.5 million for the purpose of refunding bonds previously issued by the city for the purpose of paying the costs of various public infrastructure improvements.
Introduction.
I'll introduce it.
Thank you. So as was mentioned, the aforementioned four ordinances will be discussed by the Finance Committee, and there will be a recommendation that the Finance Committee will make to us for the November 18th council meeting. So with that, I think we can move on. Ordinance 91-13.
Modifying sections 153.057 and 153.058 of the City of Dublin Codified Ordinances to amend the Bridge Street District general purpose and Bridge Street Corridor District intent.
Thank you. Introduction, please. Thank you. Mr. Goodwin.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Ordinance 9113 is a follow-up to Ordinance 8413, which was approved earlier this evening by council. Sections 153, 057, and 058 of the zoning code are essentially the introductory sections to the Bridge Street District zoning regulations within the code. And the bulk of the proposed amendments to these sections of code really resulted from the review by the Planning and Zoning Commission of Section 066, the review and approvals procedures. During that review process, as noted at the first reading of 066 last week, The Planning Commission wanted to make sure that there was a sufficient level of review criteria that allowed a reviewing body, whether it's the commission, the Architectural Review Board, or the ART, to make sure that a development proposal is achieving the overall intent and the vision established for the Bird Street District Plan, in addition to the very specific prescriptive zoning requirements that are outlined throughout the Bird Street District Code. And as part of that discussion, the commission suggested adding a level of review guidelines, essentially entitled Principles of Walkable Urbanism. And I'd like to specifically thank Commissioner Taylor, whose idea this originally was. And he took a considerable amount of time doing some research and gathering together what became the first draft of these principles and provided those to staff. And staff and the Planning Commission then worked together on the appropriate language and arrived at a set of guidelines that staff ultimately felt better fit within the general purpose, the very first section of the Bird Street District Code, because they are so overarching. So we proposed to add those to section 057 and have referenced them in section 066. So any of the required reviewing bodies reviewing a development proposal within the Bird Street District, in addition to all of the other review criteria that are already outlined in section 066, also have this set of review criteria guidelines in the original general purpose section of the code to refer to as well. And these principles are broken up into 4 categories. There are general principles that deal with things like ensuring quality architecture and design, placing a high priority on walking, bicycling, and public transit, and maintaining respect for the natural environment. Also, streets, parking, and transit, making sure that streets are designed in a way to create blocks that provide comfortable walking distances and help to disperse traffic, that new streets connect to and enhance the existing street network, recognizing that buildings and landscaping also contribute to the creation of civic places, that streets are part of the public realm. Encouraging the use of on-street parking and shared parking to minimize the size and extent of surface parking lots, and ensuring access to transit stops whenever possible. There's also a topic on open space, providing a wide range of different types of characters of open spaces, from very small intimate spaces to large neighborhood gathering places. Making sure that there's a connection to all of the various neighborhoods within the Bird Street District, and also outside of the Bird Street District to the larger Dublin community through the Greenway system, and making sure that open spaces are within a convenient walking distance for all residents and businesses. And finally, buildings, a very important aspect of the Bird Street District zoning regulations, making sure that buildings are designed to be easily convertible to allow for a change of use over time, providing a variety of housing types and sizes, as well as a broad mix of building types, providing a mixture of shops, offices, and housing. And finally, and this was a point of much discussion by the Commission, making sure that new architecture adequately reflects Dublin's commitment to quality and enduring character. Other minor proposed amendments to this section, these 2 sections of code, were noted last week as well, referencing the Dublin Community Plan, and the most current version of the Bird Street District plans is included in the community plan.
I just want to thank Planning and Zoning for including these principles of walkable urbanism. I know it was a lot of work, and I think it's something that really rounds out the entire concept of the Bird Street corridor and gives you the kind of influence and power and direction over that I think was solely missing in the previous piece of work. So I know it was a lot of work, and there's only one of you left in the audience, I think, from the Planning and Zoning Commission, but thank you, Warren, and I think you guys did a really good job on this. We ask a lot of you guys, and I just was really pleased. And Rich Taylor, I know, headed this up and as an architect, and just really fixed the thing, I think, to where it has to be. Thank you.
One question I have is with respect to density, that's not in here. Is that something that we are relying on with respect to the community plan, or how does that tie in?
Yeah, that's a good question. The community plan does, of course, deal with density. In fact, it is one of the 10 land use principles included within the land use section of the community plan. And that principle essentially says something to the effect that density is certainly a very important aspect of considering new development proposals, but the real issue is making sure the new development is of a high quality, regardless of the density. So it's not necessarily paying so much attention to the number itself, but what is the overall outcome of the development?
Okay, that's good to hear, because I remember when I was on P&Z, sometimes developers would come in and say, well, pursuant to the community plan, I'm allowed X per acre. And that was the big fight, as opposed to other issues. So it sounds like we're focusing on the other issues.
Correct.
Okay.
Very good. Well, we will have the second reading on November 18th.
Yes.
Thank you. Moving on to the resolution portion of our agenda, beginning with Resolution 66-13.
Authorizing the city manager to enter into a collective bargaining agreement with United Steelworkers of America regarding wages, hours, and terms and conditions of employment for employees within the maintenance worker, auto mechanic 1, and custodial worker bargaining unit.
Introduction, please. I'll introduce it. Thank you. Mr. Wagner.
Mayor, members of council, as introduced, the resolution is to authorize the city manager to enter into a collective bargaining agreement with the steelworkers. The key economic terms are within the memo. We are going through the process of proofreading and getting it ready for printer. We'll have it to you in the November 14th packet and for the November 18th council. And be glad to answer any questions you might have.
Council members have any questions or comments?
I just noted that I've never seen a signing bonus before in a contract.
Incentive.
Is that something new?
Maybe for the city. I've used that before in different different techniques as far as incentives.
Incentive for what?
I guess signing the contract.
Sign the contract?
Agreement, yeah.
It's nothing. It's basically, you have a $45,000 guy, you've got a 1% increase. It's $450
Well, and part of, we look at this in connection with the overall compensation plan and looked at the pay rate. It's similar to the lump sum payments that we made in the past that were effective at the beginning of the year. It's just basically called a different type of payment.
Are you saying this is catch-up?
No, this was just part of the negotiation process in order to come to the terms that are listed in the percentage of pay increases for each of the 3 years.
Any other questions or comments? No. Very good. Thank you, Mr. Wagner, and we will have the second reading on November 18th. I guess we need a motion to postpone the second reading to November 18th.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
And if you call for the vote, please.
Mr. Gerber?
Yes.
Mr. Reiner?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Salee?
Yes.
Mrs. Boring? Mayor Lucklider?
Yes.
Mr. Nissy Zerker? Mr. Keenan?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to the portion of our agenda designated as other items of interest. Community Services Advisory Commission. Looks like Mr. Hahn is going to present.
Yes, good evening. Before you have a staff report that outlines the Community Services Advisory Commission's ideas for them to be working on the upcoming months. So tonight I'm here to get any input on that list, as well as any additions, and ultimately ask for approval. Be glad to answer any questions.
I had a few questions. One thing that struck me, because we've had former conversations about the role of our boards and commissions, and I was struck by the majority of it saying they would be reviewing and giving staff input to what I perceive to be the document would have been created by the staff that they're reacting to. And because we have had this discussion before, and we've tried to appoint people that have expertise and interest in these areas, that it seemed to me that what we were seeking was their actually engagement in, like, say, this number one, this river trail, that one or two of them would actually do the research with the staff so that they're an active participant and bringing it to their colleagues, so to speak, with support of the staff, as opposed to the staff having to do all the work. So that was my confusion, because almost all of them are written this way. And I thought we were trying to engage them in a more active role than we had historically done.
I don't really know how to respond to that, other than it would be very nice for them to take the lead on the development of these various programs and have staff.
Yeah, you know, I
also
agree.
review. So that's, I appreciate that point. I don't know if we're really in a position to have them take it any further than the individuals are willing to take a particular.
Marilee,
Go
ahead.
Go ahead. No, Fred, you know, I agree with Marilee. That's what I thought they're going to fill some of their meeting times doing research on this, and, you know, maybe break down into subcommittees or something like the River Trail and some of these other things, and come back and do sort of instead of hiring consultants all the time, and of course we need them for certain specific tasks, but I sort of expected them to take on some of these specialty items. In here you have geocaching, and we have somebody, I guess, who's one of the foremost people in the region in that, already in our community, and can provide a ton of information, and is already in all these different clubs and memberships. So I'd love to hear from some of these people and see their feedback and their direction on you know, how we can perfect these different things. Another thing is that it's not on this list too, is, you know, we talked about, we were looking at metro parks, building a climbing wall and all this other thing, but I'd like to have us sometime take a look at, and I know it was mentioned in one of the presentations on the Bridge Street corridor, but have them take a look at what areas do we have that's existing. You know, we have a lot of we had a number of quarries up in this area. What areas exist where you could actually develop these things without spending $1 million and maybe get the same kind of effect for $100,000, and have them come back and tell us, hey, you know, this is what we can get accomplished. You know, this is a potential cost, and you know, so I was just hoping to see them, like Marilee said, more active in some of these ideas.
John, let me ask you on the geo mapping registration. As part of the CSAC's assignment, the commission would research mapping registration, best practices, and recommend the process and associated policies. And when I saw the river trail, it says as part of this assignment, CSAC would research, discuss, and bring forward recommendations. So I think there are quite a few that assigns their interests that they are going to participate in. So, and then the others, I think they're asking staff to maybe, hey, tell us what has gone on. For instance, like the baby boomer strategic plan. Well, staff has been focused on this because they've had the focus groups, and then they can bring it back to CSAC. So I see them working together here because of like the strategic plan. They've already planned out the focus groups, but these other things, I read it as they would do the research, mapping, and registration.
Well, those are the only two.
Well,
The rest of them are all.
Yeah, and I was going to say that, I mean, you go to the space needs, while staff will be engaging a consultant, okay? Baby boomer. City staff has been working on the development of a strategic plan. And then bicycle-friendly community initiatives, staff is in the process of reviewing feedback from the League of American Bicyclists.
But Fred, didn't I hear you say that's you feel like it has to be staff-driven because you're not getting the input from CSAC?
Oh, no, I'm just saying that it's just right now, I think we should, we can pass this message along, but some of this work, we are it is underway. I mean, the outdoor fitness, that one, you know, it's already been budgeted for. It's making sure we have the right location for this. I think the baby boomer things are in process, with or without CSAC. There are some of these things that are in process.
Yeah.
But back to the ones that really we haven't even started, the river trail or the geocaching.
Well, maybe what needs to happen, maybe we need a subcommittee of 2 or 3 council people to go meet with CSAC and try and empower them with Mayor Lee's thoughts in particular, that we're looking to you. Maybe they don't feel like they have the authority to do that. I don't know, I'm just speculating.
Yeah, I was thinking, listening to Fred, maybe the first step would be to meet with you and to really talk about not just these things, but anything else that you're working on, and where, if there is a role, where there is a role and what the role is, and then to look at things that that could be something that they're taking the lead on, and what kind of skill sets and knowledge should the people have that we're appointing to them in order to do that work. Because it's a different, to me, it's a different type of skill set, or what you might come in with if you're actually doing the work, as opposed to giving input to something that, you know, the staff have, and the professionals in the field with the city have created, and you're reviewing and saying, looks good, or add this, you know.
Well, part of me says, like the baby boomer strategic plan, you need people who work with these people, with us senior citizens. And, you know, you need, if they're doing the analysis and they've already mapped that we need this, what I see this as, you know, staff doesn't even need to come back. They can start implementing this. What I see this as is, we're working on this and we would like to have your input. What do you think? So there are different areas here. I agree on some of the things that, you know, they can do on themselves, but other things that the staff is working on, then I think it's kind of complimentary that they're bringing it back for this review.
I thought it was a
don't
good
think we're
mix
saying
when I
that.
read
Thanks.
through everything. It seemed to me that it was a good mix of CSAC initiated and initiative driven items, and then collaboration with work that staff has already done. And, you know, as time goes on, you know, this list will grow and change, and I think maybe, you know, through Fred or through us attending their meetings, we can let them know, hey, we would like you to take on, think if there's a particular area of interest or expertise. And then, you know, we need to communicate with staff when we're looking for individuals to serve on these boards, as you state, Marilee, and find out, you know, the skill set. You know, what's upcoming, and, you know, what are the people like, and then Ann can advertise for those people.
I can tell you, depending on the outcome of this particular list, the next step really would be back to the CSAC, is to divvy up the assignments, this list amongst the members, hopefully with individuals focused on areas they either have knowledge about or interest in. And so that would be kind of the...
Fred, I was curious about the recreation center space needs piece here, and I wonder if there's any merit to looking at, there's a fairly large basketball facility. We're limited in space, but if we did alternative spaces for basketball and volleyball in particular, would you be able to expand the existing community center to utilize those spaces for other areas? It occurred to me it'd be a lot less expensive to build out basketball, volleyball, the kind of things there someplace else, as opposed to trying to do a whole nother rec center. It sounds like we're running out of space over there, is what I'm hearing.
You know, and I'm definitely,
so
don't
I'm
know
just
the
saying,
particulars of that one, but I hear what you're asking, and I'll definitely make
When will that report be completed?
That's
Yeah, the funding for that was programmed in the CIP for 2014. So
we'll see it again.
be sometime, and the goal would be that we would have at least some preliminary information when we start our update of the next 5-year CIP.
I had that on my list to talk about. Right now, I think this needs to be done sooner than later. I went into the rec center today and I find out that the lap pool is closed every day from 3:30 to 5:30, so that our corporate residents and our regular residents who depend on swimming for exercise during that time are shut out. And I think that we need to really look at some of our policies on that issue very strongly. And I think the sooner the better, that we need to start talking about it now so we can plan for next year.
Why is it shut from 3:30
High
to
school
5:30?
use.
Because the high schools keep growing and they think they.
You know, we have 3 high schools now, and
Okay, so it's
Swim team and
It's
whatever.
been that way for a while. I mean,
Yeah.
it's part of the scheduling of the lanes, and actually, the patrons of the center, they know when if they're regular users, they know when the busy times are and when the lanes are booked.
but we did get an email recently.
It's like soccer, it's allocation of a scarce resource. We just got to figure out how to do it.
Yeah.
At one point, though, you had to decide who's responsible for what. The city can't be responsible for everything. It's, you need to decide what's what here. And we have gotten more and more comments on not being able to use those lanes when it's not possible for them to come in, so.
Okay. Well, if council doesn't have any issues with the list of items, if we can pass this and then amongst ourselves, follow up on Mayor Lee's suggestion, that we decide amongst ourselves who might attend a CSAC meeting or meetings and, have a conversation with them along the lines that we've been discussing this evening. Okay?
Fred, do you have the right kind of people for each of these different categories? Are you comfortable with this?
John,
Or do you have to?
it's so new. I mean, this group is essentially brand new, and we really haven't had gosh, we've only met twice, I think, and that was just some cleanup work. So I have no reason to believe that we don't have the right talents on this commission. But in reality, they're just kind of getting together, and this is kind of the first step as far as having some, list of assignments to start pursuing. Because right now it's an empty, their slate's empty.
I just might suggest that, as you're developing these different themes, that, if you have to expand these and there's a subcommittee or something, if you come back to council and we can approve that. If there's other outside people interested in the community in any one of these specialty things that can really be beneficial and allow, if you divvy this up, these assignments, you might only have 2 or 3 people on each one, and, there might be a possibility that there's other people in the community interested in these that could really be beneficial, that actually do this as a full-time hobby, or they're a manager of this, or they're involved in this kind of thing. And so, if that would be helpful to you or to CSAC, I think we'd be interested in giving you some support.
I think after the next meeting, which will be somewhat of an organizing meeting based upon this list, that we'll have a much better feel about both the level of interest of individuals as well as what they can bring to the table as far as fulfilling this. So
I certainly support this. However, I would like to ask one question, if I may, in the minutes. People are talking about location for different activities. When this discussion comes up, is there a distinction made about passive parks versus active parks, and that how we want to protect the passive parks?
Absolutely. I mean, I don't know what in particular you're referring to in the minutes. I don't have them in front of me, but I know when they were talking about the fitness areas, when we were talking about some of the base criteria that would be used in that site selection, and it definitely was more leaning toward, parks with parking lots and heavy activity zones within them.
I
think there
noticed
was a trade view mentioned as one idea in there, and I think that was more, of ideas where there was parking and, a fair amount of traffic with existing traffic within the park. I think that we would be, again, leaning for the first installation somewhere other than there. Okay?
Thank you.
I would move that we approve the items of interest provided to us this evening by CSAC. Is there a second? Ann, would you call for the vote, please?
Mrs. Waring?
Yes.
Mayor Lucklider?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Saleh? Mr. Reiner?
Yes.
Mr. Gerber?
Yes.
Mr. Keenan?
Yes.
Ms. Janice Zerker?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Fred. Staff comments?
Just two quick items. This evening, we placed at your desk the information that we had discussed at the last meeting about the Bridge Street Corridor Community Forum and the information, the brief report on that forum that we had a couple weeks ago, and that a follow-up report will be coming in December on that. And then also in your packet was we had placed the information that was requested the last time with regard to the code of conduct.
Well, are we going to discuss the code of conduct? That was what we wanted to seek approval on by the, at least by the last council meeting of this year, so that we could use it in the recruitment and consideration of boards and commission members in 2014. Is this the appropriate time, or do we wait for roundtable to bring it?
No, now's the time.
Now,
I think now's fine.
Yeah.
So looking at the document that we were presented with, the board and commission member code of conduct, this page looks like this. This is before the signatured page of the individual. I'm assuming that the first sentence should read advisory representative of the public. You're considered an advisory representative of the public, not to the public, because they wouldn't be advising the public of what they're doing.
Okay.
They would be our representatives representing the public for us. And I noticed in the area that you sign, once you're appointed, that it had in there that you were a registered voter, but it doesn't say that in this, and I think it should be added here.
Okay.
That would be one of the requirements and expectations of a code of conduct. Oh, and then my only other one was a question on from the bottom, if you count from the bottom, the dots, it's the fourth dot from the bottom, where it says, I will not accept any compensation for my service to the city other than may be authorized by city council. I will not accept anything of value for performing my duties. How does this relate to things like memorial tickets, things of that nature that we currently do offer to boards and commission members?
I would distinguish those as de minimis gifts. Plus, if they're given, I think this is seeking to limit third parties giving the board or commissioners items, not the city itself. And the commissioners could accept de minimis gifts because that wouldn't fit within the definition of anything of value.
So maybe that needs to be reworked a little, because I think it implies, at least.
Yeah, we can make it clear that it's something outside of the city.
And those are my only questions. Other people have-
Anything else?
Do we,
With respect to the
and
code.
I don't have it in front of me, I'm sorry, but when did they first become aware that there is background checks? Is that in the ad that we send out? Is it,
We did that this year for the vacancies that existed in ARB, so I think we did add that language at the end of our ad that
good,
background
okay,
checks.
just wanted to clarify that, thank you.
Well, what is a senior buddy?
In recreation and in the area of senior programming, they work with volunteer resources, and they match up people with seniors that need help, like whether it's taking them to doctor's appointment, calling them daily just to make sure they're okay. So it's matching up people with seniors that may need some type of assistance.
And I noticed, Ann, that it mentions what will be on the application that's accepted online, that it tells all the information as you just mentioned.
So do we need a motion to approve this, or how do we proceed to get this?
We can bring back the modifications.
Okay.
I think Ann was under the impression that we were going forward with this, and that's why it never came back, that we were just going to do it February timeframe when we start to recruit for these, but with the changes, we can make a motion and we can have it formalized, and that'll be good.
Anything else, Marcia?
That's it.
Okay. I believe that Faye? you want to speak to us?
Does she really want to or not?
As you all know, we've been working on some form of a municipal income tax bill. I have been working on it for the last 2.5 years. In retrospect, I really wish we would have accepted what we worked on several years ago, because House Bill 601 was pretty bad, but in retrospect, it's very good. Substitute House Bill 5, we had great hopes that the municipal coalition and all of our input, the language we drafted and everything that we put together, we had hopes that that would be included, which it was not. But there are a couple of good things in the bill that we could say that, excuse me, that will be good for all cities, and that is they have standardized penalty and interest for all cities, which will obviously be a great reduction in the Dublin interest rate, since we have not ever lowered our rate. So that'll be, I think it's a very good thing. There's a standardized residency test now, so we have listed enumerated items in the bill that will determine whether or not you are a resident of a city or not, instead of some of the cities having to go to the local boards of review pretty regularly on people who are in and out. The withholding and extension dates have been standardized, and one of the requirements that we may include, if you're remitting more than $100,000, then you'll have to remit it next day. So for us, that's 2 days earlier than they do it now. It also defines all the documentation that needs to be included with a return. So the accountants and the businesses, they all know exactly what needs to be included with each return, and so that'll definitely help with compliance issues. However, the items that are very detrimental to the city of Dublin are the 5-year mandated NOL. Even though it's not scheduled to go into effect until 2017, with a 5-year phase-in, they've set up a committee to review the loss in revenue and then determine whether or not it will really stay in law or not. We had asked that that be removed and just put not codified, because we are pretty certain that once it's in there, it won't come out. They have also changed the language for resident individuals on the treatment of pass-through offsets, which is a huge, huge detriment to the city. The way the language is now written, you will be able to offset all your gates of losses no matter where they are. So if you have income in Dublin and a loss in Columbus, you can offset them. Even though you never receive any money on the income that's earned in Columbus, you will be able to use that loss, which...
How huge? 100,000s, millions?
Well,
Just ballpark?
Well, we just got it, so we
Yeah.
don't really know what the effect will be. So we know that from the number of partnership returns that we do now that have income, will most likely none of them will ever have income again. So...
Yep.
They also have, there's language in there that exempts SERPs, which we had. Now they are currently taxable as long as they're in qualifying wages, which is the current law, except it's being litigated now. So we had asked that it not be included at all, because once the Supreme Court rules, which is where it's at, here at the Ohio Supreme Court, once that rule has been determined, that's what we'll have to do anyway. So we had asked for that. On a consolidated tax return, they can a company can opt out after 5 years, but we have no recourse to mandate for them to stay in a consolidated return. So what we have seen in some areas, not as much in Dublin as in other areas, is where companies that have more than one state location, and because Ohio has the municipal income tax, they move all their expenses into Ohio. So there's no income in Ohio because they use all of their corporate expenses in Ohio. The assessment procedure that they have outlined is far more strenuous than what we do, and basically requires that every information piece, every request for information that we have to get from any taxpayer has to be sent in certified mail. So that's $6.11 for every letter that we send. So the 12-day has been removed to 20 days. We defined a day, we defined a principal place of work, we took care of the contractors and the small businesses. So the way that the bill is written at this particular point in time, I mean, I can't say that I would support it, but obviously that's your decision as to whether or not you would be willing to do that. I know that we need to, we feel very certain that the hearings tomorrow and Wednesday, it'll be voted out of the House Committee, the House Ways and Means Committee, and out on the floor next week, and it will be passed through. So our request, I guess I'm asking now for more direction on how strenuously you want to oppose the bill.
It still has to go through the Senate, does it not?
It does.
A couple things that I would like to bring up and ask you questions about. You know, it was my understanding from both your earlier reports as well as because of some of the other groups I'm involved in and discussions that have occurred on the original bill, that through these hearings that have been taking place throughout the state, there were several of those issues that you've now outlined that the committee chairs had suggested, and I think even more than suggested, that they were in agreement with and that they would make the respective changes when they came out with a substitute bill. And it sounds as though that is not what has occurred.
The last few months that we've worked, we worked extensively with Representative Beck, and we worked on an alternate bill, which we drafted the entire bill. It was revenue neutral, there were no tax increases, and there was minimal loss of revenue to any city or village in Ohio. When we gave that bill to Representative Beck, we were quite surprised when we went to the press conference and then received the substitute bill that it was nothing like we had discussed or talked about. It's nothing more than the coalition bill again, except this time it's worse.
Well, Faye, my 2 cents, I think we still should object. I mean, I don't like the idea with what's going to happen with the pass-through entities, but I'm more concerned about, you know, you're talking about these consolidated returns and the expenditures, and basically they're going to forum shop.
Mm-hmm.
And,
exactly.
Yeah, and I think that's, I think we need to hold our ground, and you know, maybe the fight's not at the House, maybe it's with the Senate, and we do have contacts there. So,
I think we do, and I think we need to, and we, you know, we all use, we know Mr. Kellner, and I think we need to, I think we need to develop some kind of a strategy. I know Columbus is drafting a letter that will be given to the House Ways and Means Committee tomorrow in their opposition. All of the major cities are opposed. I don't know of a single city that is in support of this bill.
Faye, you mentioned levels of opposition, and what can we do that's the most stringent thing we can do to oppose this particular bill?
I think each of you need to reach out to your representative and your Senate person, and I think we as the city, we need to develop a strategy. I think we're going to have to do a resolution. I think we're going to have to go out there, and I'm hopeful the city manager in Dayton is looking to collect the big cities together to form a forum to come out in opposition. I believe that every city and village is well aware that we need uniformity, and I think we were willing to work on that, and we did create a very good bill. We really did. There was a lot of give and take, but I think it went well. So now I think we just need to let them know that the cities can't afford another hit. And we can't, but there's a lot of other cities that are in far worse shape than we can that will, honestly, I can see in a couple of years, you're going to have a lot of the small cities and villages in fiscal emergencies.
Wow. Okay, so we need a resolution.
We do.
Okay.
Is that, so a couple things. Is it possible to get that done quickly so that we can use it? And then talking points would be helpful.
I started on those today.
Okay, great. So council members
We
then
could do it
have
on
that.
Wednesday. We could adopt it Wednesday, couldn't we? We're here. We've announced a meeting.
Yeah,
That'd be
Yes,
great.
that would be great.
That'd be great.
we need to, what about the advertisement? Typically, we have the 7-day notice for legislation.
We do.
We probably should do it at the November
18th.
18th.
Hey, Faye, thanks for your
We'll know that
fight.
they have.
Much
worked.
appreciated.
They've already
Thank-
voted by that point in
Really?
the House, though.
But I think we still need to do, I mean, I would really
Right,
love
I
to
mean-
see that we could do something this week. And I think that when I talked to Sandra and to Marcia and Angel, and I think that, I talked to Matt Callner himself today on how, he's been monitoring it, but he's not actually been active. And so I think we need to make sure that everybody becomes more active.
Hey, are we talking to our local representatives as well?
Yes, we do. I talk to them all the time. But, I'm not an elected official.
Yeah, I was
You-
just gonna
You
say
have
that.
far more weight with them than I will ever dream of having,
Yeah.
and that's
Right.
good.
Well, okay.
Yeah, that's why we need the talking points.
Yes.
So that
Okay.
we could sound not as intelligent as you on it, but slightly better
You
than
don't live
today.
and breathe it.
I wonder if,
Understand tax.
as this moves forward, if this wouldn't be a city manager column so that our citizens are aware what their state legislators
Yeah, I think that
are
would be a good
up
idea.
to. And, that would be helpful too. I think that, if they hear it from ordinary citizens, hey, what are you doing? This isn't, I guess I don't understand the goal. And so that, if uniformity is it, it sounds like that's what.
I mean,
It started as uniformity and became carve-outs for special interests, which is really what the bill is about at this particular point in time, which, we have to watch that the revenue that, whether you like municipal income tax or not, that's the way Ohio is designed.
Yes.
And it's too late to go back now and change it, so we have to deal with what we have. But we also need to make sure that for economic development purposes, they keep saying this is important but our cities have to be viable, or economic development is a moot point. So I think, anything that we can do, that we need to keep it. One of the questions that I asked immediately after the bill was introduced, I said, there's no revenue gain for cities in here, but there are a lot of losses. And the reply to me was, you can always raise your rate or reduce your credit.
Nice.
Yeah, that's one of my main concerns, is that we know that over the last few years that, local governments have lost money through the local government fund and other things that have occurred. And it seems as though, like you're saying, first of all, we know what services that we're responsible for rendering to our residents, and both corporate and residential residents, and what that cost is to us. So we then have these limited options of how are we still going to provide that level of service when the revenues that we were accustomed, streams that we were accustomed to, are no longer coming in at those levels. And I think, that citizens need to understand that the state tax they've been paying that had been being sent back to the local government to use, that's part of what the article needs to really try to educate people about, is now being kept by the state. And we still have to figure out how to replace that money in some way.
Faye, this is the kind of thing, too, that should be on the editorial page, and you are someone who's so expert in this, and the three major dailies, so we can get people in Ohio aware of this across the board. And I think something we should start a program now to get the information out to the taxpayers.
Okay?
Okay. Thanks, Faye.
Thank you.
Marcia, is there anything else? Okay. We'll start with roundtable. John?
We've got some interesting news. And Sandra, do you have a slide of this picture? Can you access that?
I guess he's going to introduce it.
Yeah. The O.H. Kaplan has asked me to convey to you that Wreaths Across America would like to come into Dublin. It's a national nonprofit organization founded in 2007, and they started out by laying wreaths on service members' graves at Arlington National Cemetery. What's interesting about this is that this is something that's not going to cost us any money because it's going to be paid for by the county, and we just need your participation and support for this. It's generally held on the second Saturday in December. Of course, that'll be the 14th for us this calendar year. And they're planning to do it at 12 o'clock noon. And O.H. Kaplan is nicknamed Oz. He's a longtime Muirfield resident. And he is working on getting the bagpipers and the Air Force Honor Guard out for this kind of thing. To date, they estimate that we have 268 veterans in our major cemetery, 7 in the Riverside Friendship Village Cemetery, and 4 in the Davis Cemetery. So you're all invited out. I think this is a great thing. It's something that's not going to, we're not responsible financially for. It's being picked up by someone else. And each wreath honors all the servicemen and women for their self-sacrifice and that their families who are without loved ones during the holidays. So it's sort of a really neat tradition and really a beautiful tradition. So just want to bring you up to date. I want to thank Oz, or O.H. Kaplan, for getting this put together for Dublin. Did a really good job. He's really working hard on it. And thank you. I guess, Sandy, are you working with him on this project? So something in the wintertime coming up here in the second week. So just want to make you aware of it and hope that you're going to support it.
Thanks, John. John, was there anything else?
No, I think it's, I'm going to let Rick handle the Cicero Davis comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Mary Lee?
Just to follow up, the soccer field use policy, will that be something that will be a discussion with council at some point?
At the next council meeting.
Okay. And the letter we have here from Attorney Close, I had read those minutes, and I did think that it was actually pretty strange before I saw his letter tonight. But I wonder if you might speak to the issue that he's, raising here.
Well, I just saw the letter when I sat down at my place. This was actually an administrative appeal, similar to what we talked about earlier today, from a decision which interpreted, from the Director of Land Use Planning, which interpreted an existing use. I won't go into too much detail, but there is a requirement that all documents be submitted prior to the hearing, and then there is a code section that limits the evidence to what was considered by the original decision maker. So I was not at that hearing, another attorney was, and we can have a more comprehensive response to this. There were obviously appeals. We feel like we complied with all the procedural rules and that it would have been upheld had it been appealed. But we can certainly come up with a more reaction to the letter for you.
Marilee, I would like that too, because I read this letter and one kind of struck by the burden of proof, but the underlying issue with respect to maybe what's been grandfathered, because reading those minutes, I thought that what this council had provided for in that area, because I know we had a lot of debate about 2 years ago with respect to what businesses could continue on and so forth, in light of the Bridge Street corridor, that it almost appeared, and I don't want to say this as a fact because I don't know, but it almost looked like that the staff was trying to expand what council had provided for in that area. So I'd kind of like to see a list with respect to what that is.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Also, this case that was at BZA on the shops at Anthony and the Dairy Queen issue. I wonder, I had read it in minutes before this, and then I was reading it in this packet. And it seemed to me that in my remembrance, which I would hope isn't that flawed, but could be, I don't understand, it seems to me like we're changing stream now and saying, well, all those things that have been there all this time, we don't want them anymore, and so now we're going to say to Dairy Queen, well, you can't be in here because we're going to call you a fast food. Even though we've had an ice cream place before, we've had a candy place before, they function the exact same way as this. So I'm confused as to why today we're taking such a stance on this.
Well, I think that that's been, the definition of fast food is difficult to, we had struggled, I think, a bit with defining what latitude and what uses had gone in, and, with the new applications, and just taking, I think, trying to use the most commonly used definition of fast food. And I think that's what the report and the opinion from staff relied on, was what's most commonly, and so that was the position with the fast food. And there were appeals time, that they could have pursued, and no appeals were, they had other recourse to the courts after that, and the decision stood. So we felt like we had obviously a defensible.
Apparently, it did catch my eye as well. And, when I read through it, the rationale, when you went through the arguments, it just seemed like 5% hot dogs and the rest of it's ice cream and, no fryer, no grill. It just didn't seem like fast food to me. And I guess on another level, I really wanted the Dairy Queen there. So.
Yeah, but why is this considered different than the pizza place that's there? That, I mean, I don't get it. That's why I feel like it's now saying, well, we're changing our definition.
Yeah.
Well, I feel like we can't go back and change what was there and what's been there, when we've already had applications that were approved a long time ago. We may not have records about that, and we just have to use the definition and the direction that we can apply on a going forward basis. And given the discussions we had had previously about some of those existing uses and how the residents objected to it, we wanted to take a conservative stance.
But the residents object to just the place being there. So in reality, they're going to object to anything that comes in there because they wish the center wasn't there, but the center's been there for years and it's going to continue to be there. And now they've got another restaurant coming in. So are they going to come forward and complain about that restaurant? So I don't think we're fairly applying the rules, frankly. And I think it should be reconsidered. Because I think that you're looking at, today you're deciding that now's your definition of fast food. But it wasn't that 2 years ago or 5 years ago or 10 years ago.
I agree with you, Marilee. If this were fryers and other things going on, then yeah, I think that's what fast food facilities are about. This seemed to not be quite in that same vein, and I think it's unfortunate.
So at what point do you control it, when they start making hamburgers, flipping the hamburgers and French fries? Because the Dairy Queen, I remember, was just the Dairy Queen that we went to after a ball game, and all of a sudden we got French fries and hamburgers.
And they addressed that
Yeah,
in
they
there.
did. There's
They addressed
different kinds of Dairy Queens.
They addressed
Yeah.
Right.
And there's different kind of Dairy Queens, and this is the kind that they've elected now to do.
I'm saying, what if they change?
Well, I've read these definitions many times over the years, okay? And I wish we could go back in time and write them more clearly. I don't know how the pizza carryout is there today, and I appreciate the point you make, Marilee. Having said that, I think that you could reasonably read the definitions and the regulations with respect to this particular center, fairly to limit it, to sit-down restaurants. I think that's what was envisioned when the center was first developed. I think that's what was envisioned, and I think that somehow or another there was the door was cracked open, and we got the Marco's Pizza, and now we've got the Papa John's and so forth. But I don't think that that's what was envisioned, by planning and zoning at the time. I don't think that's what was envisioned by city council at the time, and I don't think that's what was envisioned by the residents at the time.
Yeah.
Now, how these things, these uses, over time, the two pizza operations and so forth occurred, I don't know how those got through, but, it troubles me, that, we might crack the door open again, and then, I don't think that's the direction we want to go long-term.
No, I appreciated staff's, as Jennifer characterized it, conservative interpretation, because it says in the zoning text that there will not be fast food. And we have a definition now that we're working with, and it seems to me that that's the direction we should go in. I, don't enjoy having our council chambers packed with people that are having a hard time living, with the center, in large part because of the type of business. And, the sit-down restaurants, I think, are not the problem. It was always the pizza and the fast food. So I appreciate staff's interpretation and the way that this came down, and I think that it was correct, and I think that it was the best thing for that neighborhood. These people live there. It's their backyard. It's their, immediate surroundings. As much as I'd like to be able to visit the ice cream shop, I don't want to do that at the expense of a neighborhood's quality of life.
Well, I just disagree, and I think Rick, he disagrees. I mean, everybody
guess
has
we'll
their own
agree to
opinion.
disagree.
I think there's a lot more smoke and smell and noise and everything else coming off, and those people weren't happy about anything there than a Dairy Queen, but that's just me. I mean, there's no grill, there's no fryer. That's entirely different than even a cooking operation like Mary Kelly's back in the day. There's a lot of odor and things that come out of that kind of operation at that size. So
Moving along.
I guess it's a moot point anyway, huh?
Well, I mean, about the only thing you could do is if there were an application for rezoning so that it would change what's in there. I mean, the zoning text that's in there eliminates or does not allow the use of the fast food restaurant.
Well.
So that's the text that was zoned.
I guess I'd be curious to see the actual definition of fast foods.
Right.
I mean, fast food to me wasn't ever an ice cream store.
Right.
It's a Wendy's, it's a McDonald's, it's a, Burger King, and, I mean, it's the drive-through kind of places that are considered in what my vision, but.
Well, and that one, just quickly, there was another issue with the definition for an ice cream, that they were trying to fit it into as a permitted use. And with the interpretation and what the SIC code said was actually an ice cream store was not what they were prepared to sell, because it was mainly prepackaged and not, I know, it's very antiquated,
Please.
but it was, that was another tangential issue.
Well, it had to be pretty tangential, since most ice cream is all prepackaged that people sell. I mean,
Yeah.
I've never heard of that, and that wasn't in the minutes that I saw.
Okay.
Going on to another subject, what happened at the October 29th Kaufman Road fence meeting?
Michelle attended that meeting. Or were you-
I actually
Okay.
attended that meeting. We had a representative from Parks to discuss the preliminary landscaping plan and the trail. Michelle was there. I had a draft easement because we were talking about a temporary construction easement that would permit us to go on, in some circumstances, take off the fence, install landscaping in others. I think we had around 7 residents who attended the meeting and had an engaged discussion, and they were going to take back the information to their civic association, so.
Thank you. That's all.
Thanks. Kathy?
Yeah, I have a couple things. When we talk, we haven't talked about the soccer thing, but when we do, number one is I'm very disappointed it's come back this late, because once again, we've lost one more season.
Hey, excuse me, Kathy, I thought we were going to have
It's
this soccer.
scheduled for next council.
I
gonna be on-
understand that, but if I have some questions now, they'll be prepared to answer.
Okay.
Thank you. Again, we've missed the whole season because we were told last time we couldn't do it because of the fall season. So I'm just wondering if we will look at, we're having a new public service director come in, right? And
Yes.
parks are under him. Okay,
Parks will
I'm
be under
wondering
there.
how these two things are going to relate to each other. The usage of the fields, and, which is Fred Hahn, and then the scheduling. So those are the things that perhaps they can be addressed when we talk about it.
Well, anything related to the parks will be something that can be looked at. We believe that the solution as proposed and the information that was included in this packet will address the issue, and that's what we'll be discussing at the next council meeting.
Well, that's my last council meeting, so if it gets changed, I have no more input. So the other thing, I'm disappointed that the water and sewer policy hasn't come through on that. And again, one thing that I thought we were going to do with the Bridge Street corridor, I thought we were going to have a convention center study that would tell us where would be a good place to locate this.
We're in the process of having those conversations, and we have a gentleman that's coming in town one day next week to meet with staff and Scott Dring from the Bureau, and I forget who else is included, but we're starting that discussion next week.
Okay, because one of the issues that became very contentious was where we were told that a hotel and convention center was being placed. So I was wondering where that study might be. The other thing I'd like to discuss is group homes, which, Jennifer, we've been around on that one. I guess if you have 5, you're okay. I think we need to look at the issue of group homes, though, considering the controversy that has happened and the tragedy along with that in the last week, that we need to look harder at that and what maybe our city wants to do or consider. And the other group home that we had talked about, that you said because there's 5 or less, how does that fit in with our definition of home businesses? Because certainly it's a business.
Right. The way the Ohio Revised Code categorizes those group home uses is basically they're permitted uses in the facility. So they have to be treated as a single-family residential, and they wouldn't be subject to any other permitting requirements as far as zoning goes, and that would include a home occupation permit.
So their rules override our home
Right.
rule? And there's nothing we could do about preventing a similar situation that has just occurred in the city? Not our city, but in the area.
We can lobby our lawmakers.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Kathy. Mike?
Just have one quick item. I'd ask for council's consideration on the budget to move the, I saw the insurance, the workers' comp, the health is scheduled for the second meeting. I'll be out of town. I'd really like to be here for that. If we could jostle that schedule around a little bit so that we can hear that on Wednesday night and vice versa.
Yeah, I think the meeting this Wednesday ends a little bit earlier than scheduled the next time, so we can look, we'll just have to check to see if Ron Whittington is available.
Okay.
But we can follow
I'd just
up
like
on
to be
that.
here for that because I think I can lend some expertise to that particular area. Thank you.
Thanks, Rick.
Yeah, just one item. I think everybody received in their packet a memo initiated by Sarah Ott regarding a recommendation to include Sergeant Cicero Davis on the Dublin Killed in Action Memorial. And very briefly, the background is staff has been following up on a lead that Sergeant Davis, Company H-46 Ohio Infantry, passed away due to wounds received in conflict at the Battle of Jonesboro, Georgia, in September of 1864. And apparently he was born here. It certainly fits within our policy. And I'd like to make a motion that we include him on our Dublin Killed in Action Memorial.
I'll second the motion. Any other comment? Ann, if you call for the vote?
Mr. Keenan?
Yes.
Mr. Gerber?
Yes.
Mr. Reiner?
Yes.
Mrs. Boring?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Salee?
Yes.
Mr. Nussi Zerker? Mayor Lucklider?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. That's all I have tonight. Thanks.
Very good, thank you. Amy?
I don't have anything, thank you.
Nor do I. Thank you very much. We're adjourned.
Be sure and go out to vote tomorrow.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you.